Good day, my name is Alex Tursky. I'm the founder of the Post-Platforms initiative, the project which builds so-called Web3 data space. And whenever I tell anybody that we are building Web3, I immediately get the question, is it blockchain based? Actually not. And we are not blockchain based, and actually we don't use blockchain technology at all. And yet, because Web3 name is already totally taken by blockchain, we always have to explain why we are not blockchain. Well, probably first I have to comment why do we call then ourselves Web3? Why do we go to this direct collision with blockchain projects? Well, problem is that we cannot code other way, because we take the best from the Web 1 technology, pods, we take the best from the Web 2 technology, platforms, and we connect platforms and pods. So actually we're connecting Web 2 and Web 1. How else could we name it but Web 3? Well, by the way, a couple of disclaimers. First of all, in this lecture I'm not going to explain in details what is post-platforms, what is Web3 data space, etc. We have a separate video and documents on that. Sorry, we don't have time for that. Also, I'm not going to explain the basic things about cryptography. If you are watching this video, you're interested to get the answer to the question why we are not blockchain, it probably means that you know what is blockchain. It assumes that you know basics of cryptography. Yet, if you don't know it, it's okay. We have a separate lecture on the basics of cryptography, just half an hour lecture. Please watch it separately. There you understand what is private key, public key, and what's most important, what is man-in-the-middle attack, and what is public key infrastructure which tries to compensate this problem. If you don't understand the man-in-the-middle attack, you'll have difficulties in understanding this lecture. Okay, we set up the context. You have to know post-platforms and cryptography. Now we can dive to the question why we are not blockchain, although we are building Web3 data space. Well, there are several reasons why we don't use blockchain. First one is probably scalability. Well, blockchain is centralized technology. Yeah, you got me right. Most people think that blockchain is decentralized technology. Actually, it's quite opposite. Blockchain is totally centralized. Let me explain to you. Blockchain puts all records about all people who participate in this, community. It puts all records in one big ledger, which belongs to everybody. Yes, everybody has a copy of this ledger, but it doesn't make it distributed. It makes it multiple copied. But still the ledger is one. It's exactly like DNS system in internet. DNS registry is logically one. It's controlled by ICANN organization, but all DNS servers, they have copy of it. So having copy of DNS doesn't make it decentralized. DNS is totally centralized system. And blockchain, exactly in the similar way, it's totally centralized system. And as any centralized system, it has several issues. Well, one issue, it's totally visible to everybody. It has some consequences, we'll talk about it. Another problem, it has a bottleneck effect. Imagine you have at the moment probably several millions participants in Bitcoin, for example. And Bitcoin is not the fastest currency. People don't sell it and buy it every day. So you use it as an investment. You don't invest every day. So the actual usage of Bitcoin is quite limited. But imagine we have real money. Imagine we have billions of people participating in this real money. And not only money, imagine we put all our transactions of the world in one single centralized blockchain. Trillions of transactions per second. No, it will not work. So centralized nature of blockchain is enough by itself for us not to use it. In our case, by the way, well, if somebody will ask us, could we implement e-money with post-platforms? The answer is yes, and we do it in a simple way. We put ledger to every pod. I have a pod with my 30 transactions per month. You have a pod with your 50 transactions per month. I want to send you money. Okay, I put it in my ledger, you put in your ledger. We have cryptographic keys. We sign it, get a timestamp from the notary. Deal is done. So in our case, we would transfer money directly from one person to another person. We wouldn't bother to ask the whole community to dig and to make a lot of work to create this ledger. No, we just transfer between people. Post-Platforms has a truly decentralized nature if we go to e-money. But e-money is just one of outcomes of Post-Platforms. for blockchain is actually the major product. So yeah, centralized nature of blockchain is a problem, and bottleneck which goes with that. What else? Oh, a lot of money which we have to burn. And because the task was, how can a lot of people who don't trust each other trust the result of their work? Ledger. Well, a lot of work. The original idea of blockchain, let's burn, everybody has to burn a lot of energy for us to trust the result of our work, although we don't trust the members of the community. So this very funny result blockchain produces of trusted product of untrusted people, it has a price. And this price is very high. I've heard, I'm not specialist, but I heard that the amount of energy Bitcoin burns is more than energy consumed by Netherlands. And by the way, I also always wonder why Greta Thunberg is not interested in blockchain. I think this girl could have a fun. But okay, so we burn a lot of energy. Oh yeah, people who big fans of blockchain, once they told me, well, Alex, you know, we are not going to burn energy anymore. We switched to the proof of stake. And I asked, what is proof of stake? They told me, well, you know, proof of stake is that when those who have most of coins, they have the right to certify this last transaction. And then I asked, well, does it mean that you entrust to the most rich people? Well, the answer is yes. And then my question is that, and we'll talk later on about it, that I thought that blockchain is a community of people who don't trust institutions and of course who don't trust rich people. It's like hippie from 60 years ago. Those guys, they wanted to build community which doesn't trust institutions and rich people. And proof of stake, what else it is if not trust to rich people? And why do you think that rich people have the same interests as poor people? And by the way, majority of people in the community are poor people, and just fraction of them are rich people. Why do we trust rich people? Well, rich people are okay, but I mean that probably they have different interests. So proof of stake for me is a kind of interesting situation that community which doesn't trust anybody ends up with trusting rich people. Very interesting. And we'll come back to these strange situations later on when we talk about keys. Good. So bottleneck, centralized, and a lot of energy. Again, it's all enough not to use blockchain. But let's move on. Because a lot of investors, specialists, they ask me this question about blockchain. I had to dive into the blockchain. I wanted to understand how it works. I understood a little bit. I'm not a big specialist in blockchain. Sorry, I'm building the post-platforms. But what I understood really raised my concerns about the security of blockchain. Well, if you talk about algorithms and protocols of blockchain are totally reliable. It's out of question. They are brilliant. It works very well. Well, let's say I know much better use for the hash function, but okay, if they want to use it in such a strange way, it's okay. It works. Where is the problem? The problem with security of blockchain lies in keys and key management. And actually, not many people know that all problems of modern cryptography are not in algorithms and protocols, it's in the key management. Keys is the biggest issue of any cryptographic construction. Blockchain is the same. Let's talk about keys in blockchain. Well, here I have to repeat again that you really have to understand how asymmetric cryptography works to understand this lecture. We are going to talk about uses of private keys and public keys. And modern cryptography founded 50 years ago. It's a great invention which has a lot of miracle applications. And of course, blockchain use asymmetric keys, private and public keys. But all these magic capacities of asymmetric cryptography, it has a price. The price is so-called man-in-the-middle problem, which I discuss in my basic cryptography course, which you should watch separately. The man-in-the-middle attack is a very serious problem. And I guess that majority of efforts of modern cryptographers goes to this direction. Well, how can we ensure that public key, which is transferred through public network, is not changed in the way? Imagine we want to have transaction with you. I send you my public key, you send me your public key, and then somebody in the middle can intercept them and send me and you his public key, and then trouble start. He start to read everything we communicate. Okay, modern cryptography has an answer, a certificate. Probably heard about SSL certificates for your website, that's it. That's your way to protect your public key from being changed. And the essence of the certificate is very simple. Imagine kind of Word document where you put your photograph, your name, your passport, your public key, of course, and then the signature of the notary. Yeah, I certify that this public key number really belongs to this person. And then with the signature, that certificate, it certifies that your public key belongs to you. And then you have to have your identity, by the way. So your identity, I'm Alex Tursky, is linked to this public key. And that's the way to protect it. And when I ask blockchain people, guys, how do you protect public key? They start to laugh at me and say, well, Alex, we don't protect public key because we just transfer it through the open network. It's no problem with that. And I asked them, guys, how? It's no problem. And they told me, well, you know, it's public key. You cannot derive private key out of it. So why don't we send it publicly? I have a strange feeling that these people have no idea what's man-in-the-middle attack. So it's a little bit strange for people who do cryptography, don't know man-in-the-middle attack. It's a big concern. So anyway, public key is, nobody cares about protecting public key in blockchain. Again, just this problem is enough to stop thinking in the direction of blockchain. Okay, we move on. Probably one of the explanations why these people don't care about public key is because in the nature of identity of a person in blockchain. Well, what's identity of the person? Well, it's my name, it's my passport number, my photograph, my DNA, whatever. It's part of my body, or, I mean, something which identify myself. Let's say my name. And in the normal situation, I have my name, Alex Tursky, my passport number, probably it's enough, date of birth, and then I link it with a public key through certificate. Okay, certificate establishes the link between name and public key, which allows me, in the case of normal cryptography and post-platforms, to buy a house. So if I buy a house, I buy it on my name and on my passport number. And during the transaction, of course, I use the cryptography and public key, etc. But finally, the person who sells me the house, he or she reads my name, so okay, I understand I'm selling the house to Alex Tursky. And if next day, imagine during transaction I lost my key, I get another key, then I get another certificate, still it will be on my name, but with another key, I can continue this transaction, everybody will trust because they trust my name. In blockchain, from the very beginning, remember, these guys agreed that we do not trust anyone and we don't have names. So how do you identify people? Then blockchain guys came with a brilliant idea. Well, we identify people by their public key. So that was the idea. If a person has a public key, he or she can show it to anybody, that's my identity. So I don't have name in blockchain, I have my public key. Probably it in a way explains why we don't have to protect keys, because we have to know ourselves. But how do you imagine you're buying armchair from somebody in America, I'm in Europe now, and you want to buy this armchair from these guys and you want to be sure who are they, and they send you their identity as a public key. It's a number. What's strange, I'm talking to a number. How sure am I that I'm talking to the right shop or whatever? No, it's not possible in blockchain, but okay. The idea is strange, but to deal with somebody you don't know who you deal with. Imagine I buy it. Imagine we agree that your identity is your public key. It still has consequences, and the consequences are quite terrible. Because if your identity is your public key, you cannot lose your identity. Because if you lose your identity, you lose everything. You lose everything you purchased, a house, a car, everything. It's gone. So you have to keep your identity. If you have to keep your public key, you certainly have to keep your private key. Because if you lose your private key associated with public key, you are done. You are out of the system. And we know statistically that probably 1/3 of participants in Bitcoin, they already lost their private keys. And they are gone together with their money. We heard a lot of these funny stories. And so we have a strange situation that my identity, that's the logic, my identity is my public key. I cannot lose my identity, so I have to keep public key, which means actually I have to keep the private key, because you always can derive public key from private key, but you cannot derive private key from public key. So private key is a core. You have to keep it. And if I have to keep private key, I have to keep it in safe place. I have to keep it in a safe place all my life. Well, if you have to keep something for your life, what do? Well, probably you bring to your notary, probably bring to your bank, probably give it to your friends. Probably cut it into pieces, 5 pieces, and you give it to 10 people in such a way that only 5 people when they come together with 5 different pieces, they can assemble your key. You have to do a lot of gymnastics, but point is, you have to trust somebody. And if you have to trust somebody, again, it rings a bell. We don't trust anybody in blockchain. So how come the society which starts from not trusting anybody ends up with trusting somebody to keep my private key? That's a very interesting question. But it's not the only problem. The problem is non-repudiation. Problem is that if you trust your bank or your notary or your friends, imagine your 5 friends will come together, assemble your private key, and they do transaction on your behalf. Then they send your money somewhere. Then you come to the bank and you see you have no money on your account. Then you start to cry, well, I didn't do it, and the bank says, oh, so sorry, is it your private key? Yes, your private key. You use your private key to make the transaction. So you cannot prove that was not you. Well, actually in blockchain you can, because in blockchain you say, well, you know guys, because in blockchain we used to give our private keys to anybody. Yeah, it probably was not me. That's strange. In the normal situation, if you have your private key, you should keep it to yourself. You may ask how we do it in Post-Platforms. Oh, we do it a completely different way. Of course, we also have private keys, public keys. But in Post-Platforms, our private key will be on the hardware device. For example, a SIM card. It's called mobile ID technology. It could be on USB fob. It could be on the hardware of your telephone. It could be under your skin. In any case, we are talking about a hardware device, actually computer, specialized computer, which holds your private key, which generates it, which can do any operations, encrypt, sign, whatever. But it cannot do one operation. It cannot give away a copy of private key so that you can store with your friends. In such a computer, a private key could be generated, used, but cannot be extracted out of the small computer. It will die with it. You can burn it, you can break it, whatever, you can lose it, but you cannot get a private key out of it. It means that if you made a transaction with this private key, it was you. It's a real non-repudiation schema, which is a very reliable thing. So if you've done this transaction, somebody hold your private key. Well, probably somebody stole it from you yesterday. Well, then you probably have to report the situation, and then your key will be cancelled, and then you just get a new one. But you really have to report it. And also to access your key, probably it will be multi-factor authentication. You have to provide your fingerprint, eyes, PIN code, whatever, just to get to your private key. But still it's on your hardware device. That's very important. If it is on your hardware device, then you can always be sure that as long as it's with you, nobody can use it. Well, then you may ask me, how can we hack it? How can we get to your port, in our case, to your data? In such situation, yeah, you can. Imagine you're a bad guy, you go to the notary, it should be bad notary, and then a bad guy asks a bad notary, could you please could I generate a couple of keys, private and public of course, could you please issue me a certificate stating that I'm Alex Tursky, passport number, whatever, everything. Yes, it can be done technically easily. Well, next day this guy goes to the bank and makes transaction on my behalf. Well, he says that he's Alex Tursky, he sends money from my account. Then, first of all, I get alarm that, different keys were used for Alex Tursky without revocating the previous one. It's first thing. Even if it doesn't happen, I come to the bank next day and say, well, somebody sent my money. And then I ask, okay, could you please demonstrate me who did it? So, well, it was Alex Tursky, that's his certificate. That's interesting. We look at the certificate, look at my certificate. They're exactly the same, but one thing. It's different public key. Then the question arises, police comes to the bank and say, well, who issued this certificate? Oh, it was that bad notary. And this bad notary is asked to provide some explanation, and probably this bad notary goes to jail after that. So in post-Platforms world, if somebody impersonate yourself, if he or she says, well, I'm Alex Tursky, this guy and the notary who issued certificate go to jail. I can prove that it was not me because another key was used for this transaction. Well, okay, where we are? We were in a situation that in the world of blockchain, because they have this strange logic that identity equals to public key, it means that you have to keep the public key and you have to keep the private keys, and you give the private key to all your friends, you end up with trust. Well, okay, what else? Well, probably it's enough, because we discussed that it's centralized, it has a bottleneck, it burns energy, it has big issue with public key, it has big issue with private key, with identity. Oh, another thing, with your identity, which is very strange, your identity is a public key, they claim you have anonymity. Yeah, anonymity is a very important thing, because blockchain, by the way, is a ledger where everything is visible. All your transactions in Bitcoin are totally visible. Everybody can track that this person gave money to this person. Yes, we just don't know who is this person. Is it so? Actually, not. Anonymity is one of the biggest issues of blockchain. Let's dive into it. Well, let's take Bitcoin as an example, but probably some other blockchains also we can take. And then I am anonymous, yes. And then a friend of mine or somebody else, not friend, but some journalist wants to transfer me money. So we meet in the bar. He said, well, I want to send you money. Well, I give him my public key, my identity. That's my identity. And this guy will transfer me money. And the moment he transfers me money, actually the moment he gets my public key from my hands, this guy makes conclusion. Okay, that's Alex Tursky, that's his public key. Then the journalist can publish it in his blog or newspaper, whatever. Alex Tursky has this public key. Everybody could know it. So I'm not anonymous anymore. And then everybody can take this public key, go to Ledger and check all my transactions. And probably I'm already 20 years in this Ledger. They will check my transactions for 20 years. That's something you would never, for me it's disaster. I don't want anybody to know all my transactions when I'm de-anonymized. It's a big problem. And well, blockchain guys say, yeah, sorry, made mistake. But I think they take it too easy. What do you mean make mistake? It's a fake, because they promise to people they're anonymous, but they don't provide it. Actually, by the way, this trick with public key, with private key, which you have to keep yourself, it's a little bit strange, because if you lose your private key, you lose everything in blockchain. And then again, when I ask blockchain guys, what do you do about it? They say, well, people have to be responsible. I totally understand when you have 1,000 people, computer nerds, who are responsible, they want to play this game, it's okay. But when blockchain wants to spread through the whole world, when some old lady who has no knowledge of computers, she will lose your private key and she will lose everything, all her life savings. And blockchain guys tell me, well, she should be responsible. I'm sorry, I expect 1% of people on the planet to lose their keys every year. And I cannot accept that they will lose everything they earned so far. Well, in post-Platforms, you just go and get new key and that's it. In blockchain, you cannot. Okay, let's come back to this anonymity control. How do we do it in post-Platforms? Well, if you use the right cryptography, it's very simple. When I buy a house or a car, I'm Alex Tursky. When I want to write an article or novel, I probably want to be Mark Twain, pen name. But I want it to be a protected pen name so that I can always claim it was me, so that people know Mark Twain. Well, what else? If I go deeper, when I buy alcohol, a beer, I want to prove that I'm above 21. And in this transaction, when I provide information that I'm above 21, I don't want to provide information about my name, my age. I don't even want to provide information about my public key. Sorry, just one bit of information. I am above 21. We can make it. When I go to some web shops, I could be totally anonymous. So point is that with a good cryptography in post-Platforms, you can actually control your level of anonymity from full name to pen name, this 21-year issue problem or total anonymous, you really can control the things. In blockchain, you don't control. First you're anonymous and then you are not anonymous and you don't control it. Somebody else controls for you. Well, actually, with the right cryptography, you can go deeper. You can organize electronic voting. I don't think you can do it with blockchain. Electronic voting is a very complicated protocol. Imagine you sit in front of your computer, turn left, right, well, Trump, Biden. I'm thinking for whom to vote. And when I put it left, I see on these big screens on the Times Square, +1 here. If I move it to Biden, oh yeah, I see it's +1 here. So I see the result of my work. When I switch it, I see this on the scoreboards, big results. But those people who count the numbers, they don't know who I voted for. That's the idea of voting. With right cryptography, you can do it. In blockchain, you cannot do it. We can do electronic money, of course. What we can do, we can answer the question, how much money have people who voted for Mr. Trump without exposing financial information of these people, without exposing their political preferences? We call it privacy enhancement technologies. It exists in the modern cryptography. It's quite complicated, but we have protocols which can provide this kind of transparency from one side for politicians, for economists, whatever, at the same time total protection of your privacy from another side. That's the level which is totally unthinkable for blockchain. What else? Of course, blockchain can provide electronic karma, intellectual property rights. You probably heard about this NFT, but I don't even want to talk about it. It's fake protocol. Even the protocol is fake. Blockchain itself is okay, but NFT is a broken protocol. It doesn't work. So we can provide intellectual property rights. What else? Oh, data space. The concept of data space. No, blockchain cannot provide it. Platforms. Oh, by the way, it's an interesting question. In our concept, ports, they has all your data. So people have ports, companies have ports, machines have ports, and we are talking about, because we go to Internet of Things, we are probably talking about 100 trillion ports, a lot. And we have platforms as algorithms. So we have data here, algorithm here, because finally you always get a final service result when you combine data with algorithm. In our world, ports represent data, platforms represent algorithms, and algorithms could be extremely complicated. Artificial intelligence, etc. In the world of blockchain, blockchain itself represents the data. But what represents platform? Algorithm. Platforms don't want to represent algorithm for blockchain because platforms don't need blockchain. I guess this invention of smart contract, that's a very weak attempt to put the algorithm into this equation. And whenever I ask about smart contract, I always get explanation. You know, smart contract is like, imagine you buy a cola, you put 10 cents here and you get cola here. That's smart contract, algorithm. Well, you know, I think it's a big difference between buying a cola can and a huge machine called Facebook. No, you cannot put Facebook to smart contract. It never works. I think it's a big fake. Smart contracts cannot substitute platforms. Sorry, guys. So it's a big hole here. So it's also a problem with blockchain. Well, let's try to sum it up. I think the problem is not in technology. Actually, most of blockchain guys, they don't care about technology. I remember it was Web Summit conference in Lisbon last year in November 2022. There were 70,000 people at this conference. I approached almost all of them. All of them believe in blockchain, of course. For them, Web3 is blockchain. And with all of them, I tried to discuss all the things I just discussed today. None of them understand even what I'm talking about. They just know basic things about blockchain. It's good, it's great, it's, if not proof of work, it's proof of stake, and etc., etc. None of them was able to support discussion about the real essence of cryptography behind it, which doesn't work. And I finally understood that probably it's not about technology, it's probably about mentality. It's, in a way, it looks to me, because all these people were talking about distrust in other people, distrust in society, distrust in institutions we have in society, distrust of rich people, whatever. And whenever I said, guys, we want to build a world of trust, they look at me like an idiot. Well, Alex, no, you shouldn't build a world of trust. We want to build a world where nobody trusts anybody. For me, I think it's an emotional problem. It's an anthropological phenomenon. It's like hippie. Exactly like hippie 60 years ago, they wanted to tell to society, guys, we don't like you Vietnam War, and we don't trust your institutions. But you know how hippie ended? They became normal citizens. That's how it works. And probably it's time for blockchain to stop this hippie movement and return to the reality. And reality is post-platforms. That's the real Web3. The problem is, I don't know how much society spent on hippie, but in case of blockchain, I guess investors entrusted to blockchain something like $300 billion, something like that. This money is gone, already gone. Sorry, we'll have to accept the damage. Well, so probably final comment is like, if I think about what's the big difference between our approach and blockchain, it's imagine Amazon River 100 years ago. You want to go through it, or through Africa 200 years ago, whatever. And imagine you have a first car. And you go through territory which is not serviced. I mean, you don't have gas stations, hotels in those territories. And of course you take Land Rover Jeep and you take a big pile of all materials, petrol, spare parts, whatever. You take it all with you, and with this huge machine you go through this, forests, wild forest. And that's the approach of blockchain. They rely on themselves. They don't rely on anybody. That's why they talk about not trust. And imagine Africa today. We have highways, we have roads, we have service stations, we have gas stations. You can drive with your Fiat 500. Well, if there is no walk zone there. But you have... So point is that our approach is, let's first install the whole infrastructure. In our case, it's public key infrastructure of those notaries who issue keys. That's the key point. Public key infrastructure is the foundation of post-platforms and the real world. Trust, the network of trust we have to build. When you have this highway, you have these gas stations, you can drive with your Fiat 500. And that's probably the biggest difference between post-platforms and blockchain. Yeah, we want first, well, if we talk about big numbers and big things, we first have to build the infrastructure. Blockchain goes without infrastructure, that's the difference. Well, probably that's it. And sorry, probably lecture was not very well structured. I just gave it without proper preparation. Just some friends of mine asked me to provide it. And we have a white paper on that. If you're interested, please come to us, you'll get it. But anyway, I think the problem is, the question is not why we don't use blockchain. I would rephrase it, why should we use blockchain? We don't use blockchain post-platforms. We are quite okay without it. We have great security, military grade security actually. And the whole logic of post-platforms, it doesn't require anything else. So yeah, we go our own way with a good, old, real cryptography. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Alex Turki, Post-Platforms.